In the Old Testament, we find the singular form, Ashtoreth, only in 1 Kings 11:5-33 and 2 Kings 23:13. In 1 Kings 11:5-33, she is referred to as the goddess of the Sidonians, and 2 Kings 23:13 speaks of her as the abomination of the Sidonians. 1 Kings 11 refers to her cult as one of a number of idolatrous practices pursued by Solomon as a result of the influence of his foreign wives. 2 Kings 23:13 mentions that Josiah defiled the high place that Solomon had set up for Ashtoreth, and this is stated to have been east of Jerusalem, to the south of the Mount of Corruption. The reference to Ashtoreth as the goddess abomination of the Sidonians is entirely understandable, since we know from extra-biblical sources that Astarte was the leading goddess of Sidon. Astarte's cult is also attested elsewhere in Phoenicia, for example in Tyre, and her cult spread throughout the Mediterranean, Carthage and North Africa, Cyprus, Italy, Malta, Spain, Greece, as a result of Phoenician colonization and other contacts. All the other references to the Ashtaroth are alongside allusions to Baal, Judges 13, or the Baals, Judges 10-6, 1 Samuel 7-4, 12-10, or simply the foreign gods, 1 Samuel 7-3, and are mentioned in connection with the apostate worship of the Israelites during the period of the Judges. It may be that when we read of the Baals and the Ashtaroth, this is simply a way of speaking about Canaanite gods and goddesses generally. Just as in Akkadian Ilani, 𝗖𝘆𝗰𝗶𝗁𝗏 means simply gods and goddesses. On the other hand, it is not impossible that various local manifestations of Baal and Astarte are intended. It has sometimes been supposed that the Baals and the Ashtaroth in Judges 3-7 should be amended to the Baals and the Ashtaroth, a proposal supported by the Vulgate and the Syriac version, as well as to Hebrew manuscripts. But the Ashtaroth should perhaps be preferred as the Lectio difficilia, that is, the more difficult reading, and therefore unlikely to have been corrupted from the Ashtaroth, as has already been noted in Chapter 2. The pairing of the Ashtaroth with the Baals is appropriate, since it is clear from the Ugaritic texts and elsewhere that Astarte was a consort of Baal, as also was Anat, however, whereas Astarte was apparently more prominent as Baal's consort in the world reflected in the Old Testament. As is certainly the case in first millennium Phoenician inscriptions, it is Anat who plays the preponderant role as Baal's consort in the Ugaritic texts. Astarte does appear as Baal's spouse in the Ugaritic mythological texts, but she is less dominant. These differences may reflect regional or temporal variations. Awareness of Astarte as the consort of Baal clearly lived on late, since in 𝗖𝘆𝗰𝗶𝗶𝗁𝗏 circa 100 CE, we read that greatest Astarte and Zeus, called both Demeros and the Dodos, king of gods, were ruling over the land with the consent of Kronos, Preparatio Evangelica, 1 hour 10 minutes and 31 seconds. Astarte may be the queen of heaven mentioned in Jeremiah 7:18 and 44-17:19, to whom the women made cakes of bread, burned incense, and poured out drink offerings. The name of the goddess Astarte occurs in the place name Ashtaroth, or Ashtaroth-Karnaim, Ashtaroth of the two horns, which may be compared with the statement in Philo of Byblos that Astarte placed upon her own head, a bull's head, as an emblem of kingship. The name of the goddess also lingers on in an interesting expression found in the book of Deuteronomy. This is the phrase, Astratsonika, Deuteronomy 7:13. 28-4, 18, 51, commonly rendered as the young of your flock, and in each case mentioned alongside 𝗧𝗿𝗍𝗆, the offspring of your cattle. This expression is clearly a hangover from an earlier stage of belief in which the goddess Astarte was thought to be responsible for the fertility of the flocks of sheep. We may compare the fact that concern for livestock is explicitly attested of Astarte's Mesopotamian equivalent, Ishtar, and the Ugaritic phrase, Astarte of the field, 2-1, 148:18, presumably alludes to her concern for the fertility of the field and what was in it. The older view, found in the work of such scholars as W. Robertson Smith and S. A. Driver, that Astarte could actually be represented in sheep form, is without supporting evidence. Interestingly, there is evidence that 𝗧𝗏𝗲𝗶𝗴𝗲 was also regarded as a deity by the Canaanites, and he is mentioned alongside Asherah as receiving a sheep by way of offering in KTU 148:31. This is the same text as that containing the phrase, Astarte of the field noted above. Note also the Balaam text from Deir Allah 1:16, where mention is made of 𝗧𝗏𝗲𝗶𝗴𝗲, 𝗧𝗏𝗲 Nashtar. What relation, if any, did Astarte have to Yahweh? If, as has been seen, Astarte was the consort of Baal, and if, as I have noted in chapter 3, Yahweh and Baal were sometimes equated, then it follows that Astarte could sometimes function as Yahweh's consort. The Canaanite background of Israel's sun cult, the worship of the sun, was widespread throughout the ancient Near East. It is therefore not surprising to find allusions to it in the Old Testament. Many of these date from the period of the 7th to 6th centuries BCE. Confer Deuteronomy 4:19, 17-3, 2 Kings 23-5:11, Jeremiah 8-2, Ezekiel 8:16, though Job 31-26:28 is later. It has therefore sometimes been supposed that its occurrence in Judah was due to the influence of the Assyrians, for whom the astral cult had an important place. However, various pieces of evidence suggest that the sun cult was Canaanite rather than Assyrian. First, all the other deities and cults that Josiah is said to have removed in 2 Kings 23 appear to have been Canaanite, not Assyrian. The Deuteronomist himself implies that Manasseh's astral cults, along with his other cults, were Canaanite. Confer to Kings 21:2-3. Other deities mentioned are Baal, Asherah and Molech. Baal, of course, is the well-known Canaanite storm god, and Asherah was a prominent Canaanite goddess. Speakerman's view that Asherah is here a code name for the Assyrian Ishtar will not do in view of epigraphic evidence of Asherah worship in Israel, and the fact that the West Semitic equivalent of Ishtar should be Ashtoreth, Astarte, not Asherah. Finally, as for Molech, there is no evidence of child sacrifice as a form of religious worship among the Assyrians, but this is attested in the Canaanite world. Consequently, unless there is strong evidence to the contrary, we should expect the sun and astral cults to be Canaanite as well. Was Yahweh equated with the sun? It is indubitable that the cult of the sun was sometimes celebrated in Yahweh's temple in Jerusalem, 2 Kings 23-5:11. Ezekiel 8:16. This is fully explicable on the understanding that the sun was part of the host of heaven, equals the sons of God, Job 38-7, who formed Yahweh's entourage. However, a number of scholars earlier in the last century proposed that Yahweh was equated with the sun, and this has also been argued afresh by some more recent scholars, such as Morton Smith, H.P. Stolle, H. Neer, O'Keel and C. Ullinger, E. Lipinski, and most thoroughly in a full-length book by J. Glenn Taylor. Mark Smith has also argued for a marked influence of solar imagery on Yahweh, without claiming that Yahweh was actually equated with the sun. Older scholars, such as 𝗧𝗿𝗶𝗁𝗱𝗲𝗓, J. Morgenstern, H. G. May, and F. J. Hollis believed that Solomon's temple was designed as a sun temple, and that at the equinoxes the sun rose above the Mount of Olives and shone into the Holy of Holies, and this was understood as a manifestation of Yahweh's glory. The notion that the devil or Satan was a fallen angel, who could also be called Lucifer, was derived from the passage in about the fall of the Shining One, son of the dawn, Helel ben Sahar, Lucifer in the Vulgate, found in Isaiah 14:12-15. This understanding appears to be already presupposed in Luke 10:18, and is found later in Church Fathers, such as Origen, Eusebius, Tertullian, and Gregory the Great. The interpretation of the verses in this way was, in effect, a remythologization of the passage. for the author of Isaiah 14:12-15 had used an ancient myth simply as an illustration of the hubris of a historical ruler. The king of Babylon confer Isaiah 14:4 rather than literally, and the historical context in Isaiah was ignored by those who remythologized the verses. How you have fallen from heaven, O shining one, son of the dawn! How you are cut down to the ground, you who laid the nations low! You said in your heart, I shall ascend into the heavens. Above the stars of God I will set my throne on high, and I shall sit on the mount of assembly on the heights of Zaphon. I shall ascend above the heights of the clouds. I shall make myself like the Most High, but you have been brought down to Sheol, to the bottom of the pit. The shining one is Venus, the view that, the shining one, son of the dawn, denotes the morning star. Venus is the most likely one. This star rises before the dawn, and is eventually blotted out by the light of the sun. The view that the star in Isaiah 14:12-15 denotes Venus finds strong support in the ancient versions. The LXX renders the name by the morning star, that rose in the morning, and the Vulgate similarly translates Lucifer, the morning star, that used to rise in the morning. Again, the Targum has, who was resplendent among the sons of men as the bright star, Venus. Among the stars, Venus as after. In the light of the above discussion, it has emerged that Isaiah 14:12-15 refers to the rise and disappearance of the morning star Venus, and that this has been interpreted in terms of Canaanite mythology. Is it possible to identify the morning star Venus with a figure in Canaanite mythology? It is very probable that this role was filled by the god After, even though this is nowhere explicitly stated. In South Arabia, the god After was certainly identified with Venus, and in Mesopotamia, the cognate deity, the goddess Ishtar, sometimes represented as male, likewise represented the planet Venus. Similarly, the Canaanite female equivalent of After, Astarte, 𝗧𝗿𝗱𝗏𝗏, was equated with the Greek goddess Aphrodite, equals Venus. It is probable that After and Astarte represent Venus as the morning and evening star respectively.